Singapore will be pumping a record $25 billion into research and innovation over the next 5 years. The Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2025 plan will focus on 4 key areas: health, sustainability, manufacturing and the digital economy.
Announcing this blueprint earlier today at a virtual press conference, Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat also said that a portion of the budget will be set aside for new areas of research which may arise.
Given the rising speed of change and our evolving needs, our RIE2025 plans will set aside 15% of the total RIE budget, or $3.75 billion, as white space. This will give us greater agility and nimbleness in responding to emerging priorities, new breakthroughs, and changes in the global technological landscape. The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown the world a curveball, but it has also offered a model of how we can work together and leverage science and innovation to overcome our common challenges. I'm confident that this will drive economic recovery and growth and address our broader national needs.
Well, health and biomedical sciences will be expanded to address Singapore's rapidly aging population.
Areas of focus include improving prenatal and early childhood development, learning outcomes in children and adults, as well as the health and contribution span of seniors.
One new exciting area of work that we are doing in this domain is to expand the health and biomedical science domain to now cover human potential. It is especially pertinent for Singapore that we are doing this because our only available natural resource is our people. Through R&D in this area, we will know better what interventions we can make to achieve meaningful, active and productive longevity.
Meanwhile, manufacturing will be expanded beyond advanced manufacturing to include trade and connectivity.
Greater emphasis will be given to climate change, decarbonisation and the transformation of our built environment.
In the digital sphere, Singapore will ramp up key technology areas like AI and cybersecurity, as well as better integrate technology and governance.
This year has been a digital watershed. Many years of digital transformation has occurred in the space of several months. And in Singapore, for example, the e-payment transaction volume has tripled, and the number of enterprises on our e-invoicing network has gone up 20-fold in this period when we've had to put up with COVID. So in RIE 2025, we will accelerate the development and translation and ultimately the adoption of key technology areas such as AI, cybersecurity, trust technologies, communications and connectivity, and quantum computing. All of these will undergird the next bound of economic growth in the near term as well as in the medium to long term.
Here to tell us more is Science and Environment correspondent Audrey Tan. So $25 billion over the next 5 years into 4 key areas: health, sustainability, digital economy and manufacturing. But Audrey, does this chart a new path in Singapore's research focus, or are we building on existing trajectories?
So the 4 pillars are not new, and we've already seen Singapore's investment into these 4 areas in previous RIEs. Like for example, in 2020, RIE 2020 already saw investments into these 4 areas. But what's new this year is that each of these pillars will be expanded in the scope to meet new national needs. So for instance, in terms of healthcare, we've already seen how Singapore's investments into the health and biomedical sciences has put us in good stead to overcome the COVID-19 challenges. So now it's going beyond that to also include things like human potential. So talk about longitudinal studies to get better understanding of how maybe I could say quality of life can be improved. In terms of manufacturing, now it's no longer just about how we can make manufacturing itself more efficient and more productive. It's also about boosting Singapore's links with the rest of the world in terms of enhancing our air and maritime links, for instance. Sustainability too will also see a new focus in things like dealing with climate change and technologies to cut our carbon footprint. So I would say that the focus is kind of the same, it's just that each of these areas would now be expanded in scope.
Right. And your area of focus is science and environment, Audrey. Anything particularly promising or exciting that will come out in the next 5 years?
So in terms of sustainability, there are like about 4 new different approaches to dealing with urban solutions. Climate science is one, so trying to improve our own talent pool or our better understanding of climate science and how it affects Singapore. But what I found interesting was that more investments were being made into decarbonization technologies. You know, with all this talk about COVID-19 and the impact it has had on economies, scientists are warning that if nothing is being done to deal with climate change, which is caused by human activities, the changing climate, extreme weather events could kind of wreak the same havoc on human society and economy as did COVID-19. So developing low carbon technologies, whether it's be using green hydrogen as a fuel, it does not produce carbon dioxide as an emissions when it's burned, or other kinds of technologies like carbon capture technologies where you capture carbon dioxide being emitted by factories and then you capture it to store it underground or to convert it into other useful substances. These are technologies that are interesting, but it's still very nascent worldwide. So the fact that Singapore is investing into this area, I think it's definitely an area to watch, because not only will it cut our own carbon footprint, we could potentially export these technologies for other cities looking to do the same.
Right. A new national research program for epidemic preparedness and response was announced today as well. You spoke separately with Chief Health Scientist Professor Tan Chor Chuan on it. What did he say about how this program will help Singapore's defences against future disease outbreaks?
Yeah, so the PREPARE program is also interesting. And I guess in terms of the new programs, based on my conversation with Prof. Tan, I took away 3 kind of key areas. So the first would be enhancing surveillance of potential pathogens that could impact human health. So we know that many of these viruses that are affecting humans, whether it's this SARS-CoV-2 or the virus that caused SARS, they actually came from animal populations. So by working closely with other scientists in our region, we would have a better surveillance network about, the potential of other viruses coming up, and that would give us ample time to take precautions. So surveillance is one. Secondly, he talked about, bringing capabilities together, like in terms of the scientific community. I mean, we always talk about them as one cohesive whole, but within the community itself, you have different scientists from different institutions. Each of them have their own areas of expertise. So he says that this new program would kind of bring all these scientists of different expertise and backgrounds together, and that could help speed up the development of diagnostics, therapeutics of vaccines. And this is important because when you talk about dealing with a pandemic, an infectious disease, you would definitely need people from more than one expertise. So the example he cited was, for example, in developing a diagnostic test kit, you would need someone who with understanding of biology, like the virus and the pathogens, but you also need someone who would be able to do microfluidics. So it's a field of science where you have a very small sample and you would need to know how to manipulate it, like in the case of a diagnostic test. So that's interesting. Another third area would be, he said that funding could be provided under this new program to build national infrastructure for the long term. So it includes things like, data storage, so that data could be stored securely and accessible to researchers who need this data in order to do their scientific work. And also potential biobank, for instance, where you can store samples that are needed, clinical samples, biological samples, and all these are important. So Prof. Tan also talked about one example where, during the COVID-19 situation, we saw many research groups coming up with diagnostic test kits in terms of serology tests, antibody tests. And one thing that was useful was their access to patients who had SARS back in 2003. Their patient serums was used to kind of like validate the test and see whether there was no cross-reactivity, since the virus that caused COVID-19 and the virus that caused SARS are from the same family. So all these are really interesting nuggets of information that he shared, and it will definitely boost our preparation to deal with future outbreaks in the future.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Audrey. That was Audrey Tan, Science and Environment Correspondent for the Straits Times.